Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Howard. Welcome to Top of Mind. What a complex time and chaotic time we're living in globally. And certainly the actions of the US administration are making it more complex, but also making it extremely difficult to plan. So, any kind of strategic planning or budget planning and so on, you're all living this. I know that you are. But as I was thinking about sort of what's happening around the world, the image that keeps coming back to me is that of shearing forces. So, these are forces that tend to try to pull apart the way things work structurally. So, buildings or more commonly airplanes might be something you're familiar with. So, when an airplane encounters wind shear, it is these wind forces that are causing it to maybe go off course or make it difficult to land or whatever. Sometimes you can predict them and sometimes you can't. But I was thinking, why doesn't a plane like come apart when it experiences wind shear? Well, there are a few reasons for that. One is the architecture of the plane itself. It's built to be resilient in that way. But also, it's gone through lots of testing. So as you're building and modeling airplanes that will be airworthy, you're actually running them through all kinds of simulations and tests to make sure that they can actually withstand these kinds of forces. Then you add on top of that really good forecasting, so you know when you're headed into a situation where you're likely to encounter wind shear, so that you can take action. So I was curious about this, and I actually went and looked up to see, well, can you use autopilot during a wind shear condition? And it turns out that you can, but what it's doing is it's giving the pilots advice about how to recovering from a wind shear environment. So the pilots are probably more in control than they would be typically, but actually getting really high fidelity advice from the systems on board. So let's take that into an enterprise context. The same things apply. So, do I have an architecture, both of systems, but also of people and the skills that they have and the locations where I work and function? Are those architected in order to provide some resilience when forces strike? Have I modeled scenarios where I can determine whether I'm prepared to react to an oncoming or emergent scenario? And so testing all of those things. So there are aspects of resilience that help you actually prepare and withstand these types of actions. But when it comes to like reacting in the moment, so imagine pilot, you have advice coming from systems, let's say maybe they're AI systems in an enterprise, giving you advice about probabilities and what you could possibly do. At some point, it comes down to experience. So the experience of the leader, but also the experience of the crew. Are they prepared? Do they know what to do? Are they able to actually shift really suddenly to actually perform a different set of actions? And probably because they have practiced that. So, this idea of adaptation in the face of shearing forces is something that we're all experiencing, not just in enterprises, in the private sector, but clearly public sector as well, but even in our own personal lives as we weather changes in finances, the macroeconomic environment, the markets. Okay, so what about when you face these situations of disruption or complexity or chaos? As I'm talking with my clients around the world, one of the interesting things that's starting to come up is the idea of using complexity as an input to intelligence. So you think about what maybe has happened in global markets over the last couple of months. Lots of ups and downs, and also sort of various wild swings and that kind of a thing. So if you have a model, perhaps that is aimed at capital markets and understanding the business conditions that are impacting markets, think how much those tools have learned. Those models have learned. So actually, the complexity of the environment creates a richer model. And this is an evolutionary thing in a sense, in that as we encounter difficulties in life as organisms, as systems, as governments, as enterprises, we learn from that friction to become better in the way that we respond. Now, what's different, say, between 2008, the financial crisis of 2008, and what's happening today, is we're feeling the economy contracting is certainly spasmic at the best of times recently, is that the capabilities of AI are so much more sophisticated and mature than they were in 2008, so that we can do more real time analysis, but also real time reaction to things that are happening in market conditions, in geopolitical conditions, and so on to help us make better decisions. Now, I've talked in Top of Mind before about probabilistic systems and the types of decisions that probabilistic systems are good at supporting. So these are neural network systems, the whole generative AI space, but lots of other techniques where it's actually giving you optionality. This is when these types of systems really come into their highest value. which takes us then into a further conversation about AI. If all we do is focus AI on productivity, we miss the other potentially really high value things that it can do. And I think it was a bit like if you buy a really powerful SUV, but you only use it to take the dogs back and forth to the park. The dogs love that, but you're actually underusing the capabilities of the vehicle. I mean, it was built to like haul heavy loads and work in rough conditions and that kind of thing. That's where it really sort of shines. Now, AI is the same. And I worry that if we only focus on productivity, which is hard to put into the bank, just to be clear, because there's leakage, it's hard to harvest, and so you get sort of these decreasing impacts of productivity. But if you aim it at things like fraud prevention or capital allocation or negotiating with third parties and creating better contracts, those types of things is where you start to get more value. And for those organizations that are using it to create entirely new products or services or ways of interacting with customers, even more value there. And so rigidity can come from applying a technology in too small a way, and we really need to think in a bigger way. Another thing that causes lack of resilience is just getting stuck, getting frozen. And it's tempting, right, to say, well, maybe I need to rethink my entire strategy because the world is sort of chaotic and crazy around me. The truth is that a lot of the things that you had planned as strategy still really valid. You may need to tweak some things and be responsive and agile as you implement it. But what I'm seeing with many of my clients is they're at a point now where they're enacting the strategy, they're moving forward, but with eyes wide open. So it is sort of a wise progression towards the goals that they originally were seeking. Okay, so in the face of complexity, we have some decisions to make. We don't want to be stuck. We don't want to under apply the investments that we have. So, one of those decisions that you need to make is this sort of portfolio of spend and investment. There will be things that actually need to be reduced. That's natural, especially if the economy contracts. But be careful that you're not cutting into dependencies there. So, for example, CFOs are holding money to actually spend on AI, but we need to be very clear about what AI is and what the dependencies are. So, you may say, well, I'm going to spend money on AI, but you're not thinking about sort of the data or infrastructure implications of that, and you cut spending there. So, you're actually eroding the foundation of what's going to make AI successful. It needs to be sort of a much more holistic kind of approach. There's also aspects of human resilience. And what I'm seeing some companies do is think about, do I have people not just doing the right things, but are they doing them in the right places? So thinking about sort of liquidity of human capital in different parts of the world to do different types of work. This has been something happening in supply chain for a while as we reconfigure supply chain where work gets done, where things get made, where things get moved, and actually being able to have some anti-fragility in the supply chain itself. You could take that concept and apply it to lots of other things that an enterprise does. Having people, say, working on R&D in one part of the world where they're working more on the manufacturing side in another. And maybe that needs to change as tariffs come into place or different geopolitical positions and reactions are happening. And then finally, decisions about what to implement. I had a CIO say recently that they felt like they had been stuck in pilot purgatory. So lots of pilots going on, and but there's a lot of entropy there. So entropy meaning lots of activity, but hard to convert it into work. If the economy contracts, as many expect that it will, now's the time to say, as we said, on the east coast of Canada, time to fish or cut bait, right? You sort of figure out what are those things you're going to not pursue anymore? What are the things that are really going to return value? Focus the emphasis on those. Don't stop them, but kind of double down on a smaller number, especially those things that are more likely to produce returns that keep you resilient, that keep you growing, and that keep you healthy. So, some ideas about complexity, chaos, resilience. Remember that we're kind of facing shearing forces right now. We react to those shearing forces with better decision making, better architecture, better simulation, better forecasting. And it's time to continue to move forward, but choose your pace as you do that. Choose the scope of decisions that you're willing to make. Some of the places where you can experience this content, there's some new work from Nate Suda that talks about beyond productivity. So many of the things that I've talked about here, but with the real data behind them. Also, in our supply chain conferences, which are taking place through the spring and early summer of 2025, where we're exploring supply chain resilience. As we head into the fall of 2025, I've been working closely with our IT teams and the CIO team as we prepare for IT Symposium, where this will clearly be a major thread of research throughout that conference. So lots of good advice to come, lots of good advice that's already there. Thanks for joining me. I'm Chris Howard. This has been Top of Mind.